Basic Music Theory Part 4a, Chromatic Intervals, Counting Half Steps. If you'll recall in Parts 3a and 3b, an interval is the time or distance between two things. While rhythm deals with how we place sounds in time, our discussion of pitches or notes deals with the relative frequencies of notes, their highness or lowness in relationship to each other. The white key or generic intervals you learn to identify in 3a and 3b are a fundamental element of understanding why music sounds as it does. The white key or generic intervals only give us a broad, general sense of what the interval might sound like, but being able to manipulate and generalize this information allows us to see patterns common to the vast majority of tonal music produced in the last 400 years. Parts 3a and 3b dealt with what are called diatonic intervals. There's a fancy related term called heptatonic. Can you make a guess as to what the word heptatonic means? So you have to think, what does the prefix hepta mean, and what's the meaning for tonic? Hepta means 7, and tonic means tones or notes. Heptatonic would mean a scale using 7 notes. If you'll recall, our musical alphabet A through G is also 7 notes. But if there are only 7 letters in the musical alphabet, how do we get 8 notes in most scales? So let's go on to the term diatonic. Di means 2, and dia means passing through. Diatonic would be referencing how the notes relate to each other alphabetically. The next note or letter name. So for instance, A to B would be diatonic motion. A to B to C would also be diatonic. C, D, E would be diatonic. Going backwards, E, D, C is also diatonic. You could start on G, F, E, D. Those would all be diatonic motion because you're moving from one note to the very next letter name. But now we move on to the chromatic relationship between notes. This is a precise measurement of the relative distance between pitches and tells us exactly what the interval sounds like. F to C, an interval of a fifth, sounds different than F to D, which is an interval of a sixth. F to C, the fifth, sounds different than F to C sharp, which is also a fifth. And finally, F to C sharp, an interval of a fifth, sounds the same as this interval of a sixth. F to D flat. Sometimes the same interval can sound the same, sometimes the same interval can sound different, and sometimes different generic intervals can sound the same. You may already have an intuition as to why that's the case, but let's make sure we have the tools to demonstrate that. Here's our keyboard. Find the pairs of black keys. Look down and to the left. That's the note C. And fill in the rest alphabetically. Remember to look at the keyboard as a series of half steps. A half step is 2 keys next to each other with nothing in between. Sharps would be a half step higher, and flats are a half step lower regardless of whether or not you end up on a black key. So let's try to determine the number of half steps from one note to the next. Let's try A, up to D. This is important. Unlike generic intervals, when counting half steps, you do not count the note on which you start. You only count the motion. So there's our A, and let's count each half step as we make the move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Starting on A, going up 5 half steps would get you to D. Let's now try C sharp or D flat, up to A. Remember, unlike generic intervals, when counting half steps, you do not count the note on which you start. There's our C sharp D flat, and let's count the movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Starting on C sharp or D flat, if you move up 8 half steps, that gets you to A. Let's now try a descending interval. There's E, down to A sharp or B flat. Remember, unlike generic intervals, when counting half steps, you do not count the note on which you start. So there's our starting note. Now let's count the movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you start on E and go down 6 half steps, that would get you to A sharp or B flat. F to C is a fifth, and it sounds different than F to D, which is a sixth. F to C, a fifth, sounds different than F to C sharp, which is also a fifth. F to C sharp, an interval of a fifth, sounds the same as F to D flat, which is a sixth. F to C sounds different than F to D because F to C is 7 half steps, F to D is 9. F to C sounds different than F to C sharp because F to C is 7 half steps, and F to C sharp is 8. F to C sharp, an interval of a fifth, sounds the same as F to D flat, which is a sixth because F to C sharp is 8 half steps, and F to D flat is also 8 half steps. But you already knew that. So here we go counting half steps. Accidentals, the flats and sharps, are now essential. Do not count the note on which you start. Then count the half steps, counting each motion, and then count the note on which you end. This has been Basic Music Theory, Part 4A, Chromatic Intervals, Counting Half Steps.